All right. Hey, everybody. This is Liza with Local First Arizona and the Rural Development Council. I have a very special guest with me today. We are kind of touring around rural Arizona talking to city and town councils as they prepare for budget season. And I happened to come across a webinar with Jim Rounds, who is with me today, where he was speaking with the Arizona Chamber about a report that was recently done on tourism. And I felt that the information was timely and critical to get out as rapidly as we could. So we're gonna shoot off some questions here with Jim and get you the information as it's coming. So Jim, would love to turn it over to you and let you do a little introduction. Tell us a little about yourself and we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Jim Rounds. I'm president of Rounds Consulting Group, and we basically work in the area where economics crosses with public policy. And so we analyze numbers, but then we try to make them work to, better the lives of Arizona residents.
Perfect. And Jim, I've seen you in circles all over the place, but certainly you've been in rural, you understand the economics of rural, and it's kind of a passion for you.
Yeah, that's right. It even before COVID, it was still challenging traveling around to some of the communities, and they're some of the most passionate people about economic development, but there's also limited opportunities. And I enjoyed doing that because people really appreciated the conversations. And before, it was more about how can we expand the economic base? How can we maybe get into heighten tourism activities, things like that, that we'll be talking about. And it's kind of turned into more of a how do you survive mode. And I'm getting worried.
Right? Yeah, we are as well. I think CARES funding coming through, at least there's hope for at least some supplemental dollars coming into rural. I'm glad to see that that shook out. But prior to COVID, we work in rural communities all the time, same as you. And we saw different challenges. We were always kind of arguing back and forth, not arguing, debating back and forth the definition of economic development in rural communities. What did you see prior to coronavirus and COVID-19 that you thought was the biggest challenge in economic development for rural?
Like you said, it really varied, and it varied depending on proximity to another major community, like closer to Greater Phoenix or Tucson, additional opportunities came up. But we had infrastructure issues. I think telecommunication infrastructure, access to the internet, it hasn't been discussed enough over time. Um, Getting grant monies so that they could take care of projects. And we volunteered our time quite a bit in working with the rurals because they don't have the opportunity to put together the biggest strategic plan that somebody else may. They have to have a lot of volunteers. And that's also what I appreciated, because when you attend those meetings and you do some work for them, there's 40 or 50 people that show up, and they'll give you advice and they'll be critical, and you become better and they become more knowledgeable, and it was a good relationship. I enjoy it. I'm going to continue it.
Yeah, we always said, working with some strategic planning projects, that if we were in metro, we would have maybe 3 or 4 stakeholders at the table talking about their strategic plan. But when
Yeah.
you're in rural and you're in a community of, let's say, 3,000, you have 3,000 stakeholders that want to say in that strategic plan. And so it's always just a different experience.
Yeah, and getting to talk to the business owners here in Greater Phoenix, or when we do some work in Tucson, we're talking to usually the broader organizations. Sometimes if we have some connections, we'll talk to individual businesses, but it's really helpful when you go to rural Arizona and you talk to somebody that owns the restaurant and they say, we've already been struggling. What are we going to do now? There's just all sorts of challenges, and again, it varies by industry, but tourism is the lifeblood of a lot of rural Arizona, and it's been decimated. I don't think it's gotten enough attention, and I'm hoping that'll change.
Right. So to that point, and kind of the purpose of our discussion, you come on board and worked with Arizona Office of Tourism on kind of an impact study post-COVID. Tell us a little bit about what that study was about and what you found.
So we were asked to give some context into just how problematic this has become for tourism. And something to keep in mind is that in this particular downturn, most of the job losses have been in low wage industries. So we have poverty issues to deal with. There's lots of others. We've maintained a lot of our higher wage jobs. If this recession ends up being a little bit shorter, then the maintenance of those higher wage base sector jobs will create additional demand for the others. But my fear is that we're going to be losing a lot of the mom and pop type businesses, the restaurants that we go to, and we're going to have more corporate chains because they can support loss leaders for a little while. I'm still very bullish on the state long term, but we projected that through 2022, we're going to lose over $30 billion in economic activity in tourism. And that's a lot of money that would be going to state and local governments to allow them to put in the infrastructure and the other things that they need to survive, economically. So it's a little bit of a downward spiral. I've become a little bit more hopeful that our prediction of a U-shaped recession rather than this just terrible 5 or 6 year downturn that some of my colleagues are predicting. I don't think that's going to happen, but we still have to figure out a way of getting through the next couple of years.
Okay. So specifically to tourism and budgets, all of our city councils right now are finalizing budgets. Arizona Office of Tourism is looking at sort of their rural co-op plan and how much to support rural tourism. Trends look like people are taking more road trips and staying within their local markets versus getting on any flights or going elsewhere. With all that and taking into consideration, what do you think city council should be doing with tourism budgets this year?
Well, I would like to see them increase, but it's a catch-22 because there's less revenue to go around. So you have to start doing math much like you would. We always hear government officials say we have to run government like a business. Well, if we ran it like a business and we had something that was going to return a positive return on our investment, we would be investing in that area. And our best guess is of all those billions of dollars of lost activity, we're going to get about 20% of it back, maybe 30%, but it's going to depend on our marketing. But for every 10% that we get back, the state of Arizona gets $100 million in state tax collections each year. And so one of the arguments that we made was the budget is already very slim. I'd like to see it doubled or tripled or even more, because that's what's needed to get in front of the other states to get that domestic travel. International travel is going to lag, but just like you said, the domestic travel, people staying in the state, but also staying in the Southwest, you're still going to see some individuals coming here from out of state. I'd like to see that investment. And in the past, I've always been a little bit critical of different groups saying we have a 20-to-1 return on our investment or 30-to-1. You only need a 1-to-1 return for the money to at least cover the cost. And I feel like in this case, there's going to be a huge return on investment, but it's got to come at the state level, coordinating with the locals. The local groups aren't going to have enough funding where it's going to really make a difference. It's got to be coordinating and leveraging larger dollars. And we have to figure out a way of getting the message out, because the math is the math. It was accurately calculated. It was a complex analysis. These are just facts. It's not playing politics. We need to help these communities in this area, and it starts with the state, but other communities have to figure out how to coordinate with the state.
Right. So kind of just in summary, although we recognize we lost a significant amount of tax revenue through, tourism due to this, now might not be the time to cut those tourism budgets because of the expected return, because of the trend of local travel, and because of its impact on these local communities. So before we make those cuts, take that hard look, one last look at tourism, and make sure that's where, you're budgeting appropriately.
That's a good point. It's protecting the current budget, but if you're going to be getting multiple dollars back for every dollar that you spend, it's actually going to be helping with the budget problems over the next couple of years. And we're going to have one of our best expansions in our state's history once we get through this. We have a lot of economic fundamentals set up. We have to be careful to not cut areas like universities, workforce programs, small business programs, and especially tourism, because they'll think that they're cutting. They'll take $1 off the expenditure list when they do their budget book, but what they're really doing is reducing their, for every dollar they cut, they're probably going to be losing another 10. So we have to have some forward-thinking policymakers really get on board with this. And again, it's economics. It's not playing politics. And I think that we need more policymakers that listen to the math rather than the political dogma.
Perfect. One little plug for us, and we'd love for you to help us spread the word, but we do have rural community profiles up at ruralaz.com, and perfect resource for people that are planning their travel and looking for road trips. If you're a road tripper, check it out. But in every way, shape, and form, appreciate what you're doing to promote rural Arizona and the tourism there and the economies in general, and love working with you on those projects. So appreciate your time.
Thank you.